Now that the federal government has succeeded in getting its media reforms through the parliament, its next goal is universities. The stakes are high, $3.8 billion over 5 years, given that the higher education package was the budget's biggest savings measure. If the bill passes the Senate, and that's still a big if, it'll saddle students with greater debt and could make universities even more reliant on international students. And as political correspondent David Lipson reports from Canberra, with only 4 parliamentary sitting weeks left in the year, the pressure's on.
The coalition has twice run the gauntlet on university reforms and twice failed, despite the best efforts of the former minister.
1,700 positions would go.
I'm a fixer.
Attempts at major cuts broke down.
Liberals are not welcome here.
The current minister is taking a different approach, slow, steady and pragmatic, but he too is facing a wall of resistance. And with the latest round of cuts due to kick in on January 1, he's running out of time. Almost a decade since the last car rolled off the Mitsubishi assembly plant in Adelaide, the site has been transformed.
What about pumped hydro?
Yeah.
It's now an innovation centre for the Flinders University Tonsley campus.
A site of almost, if you like, industrial decay, and now turning into one of regeneration and growth.
The Flinders Vice-Chancellor says those green shoots are now in danger, claiming up to 220 jobs could be shed across South Australia's 3 universities as a result of the proposed 2.5% cuts to government payments next year and the year after.
At Flinders alone, it is tens of millions of dollars of funding that will be at risk. That puts at risk the services that we can provide, the support that we can provide, and the quality of the educational provision that we aspire to do always to deliver.
Well, under our reforms, universities will still see their funding grow. Across the sector, around 23% growth. In the case of Flinders Uni, it's projected to be around an extra $56 million over the next 4 years. So that's still a good, strong rate of funding growth, one that many small businesses would be envious of.
Quantitative methods actually say that.
That's interesting. My degree is biomedical engineering, which would take me about 5 years to complete, and roughly about $40,000 is how much the course is going to cost.
That's $440, thank you.
Thank you.
Uni students these days are well accustomed to big debts.
I don't want it over my head. Like $40,000 is a large amount of money.
But their debt burden will be even heavier if the government's reforms go through.
I'm not studying full-time because essentially I have to work close to full-time, if not just under full-time, to make ends meet, because the cost of living for students is quite high.
Starting next year, student fees would rise by 1.8% each year to 2021, in all a 7.5% increase. Those charges won't have to be paid up front, but the debts accrued will have to be paid back sooner. Instead of repayments starting when graduates earn more than $55,000, they'll kick in at an income of $42,000.
Even now, I kind of consider whether it's all kind of worth it, and a lot of my friends would also kind of make that consideration, I guess, kind of comparing it to whether, they're going to get a job at the end of their degree.
Students are going to be asked to pay more, and they are going to get less because universities are going to have less funds.
Well, the universities are really professional whingers.
Senator David Leyonhjelm has no time for universities and students crying poor.
Bear in mind that the taxpayers are funding about 60% of their expenses up front. It's not reasonable for them to not tighten their belt when we've got a massive deficit and debt.
The reform package would save taxpayers $3.8 billion over 5 years, making it by far the biggest save of this year's budget, but only if it passes. The minister has already secured passage of his schools package and childcare reforms. Universities would make it 3 from 3, but he's up against a near intractable Senate puzzle. The Xenophon team has indicated the cuts are much too deep and must be watered down. But if the minister gives too much ground, he'll lose the votes of Senators Bernardi and Leyonhjelm, and the legislation will fail.
He gave away a lot of extra money to get the childcare legislation through. He gave away a lot of extra money to get the secondary or school education bill through. Gonski too. If he tries it again, he'll absolutely lose my vote.
With just 4 weeks of Parliament left this year, the Minister isn't ruling out splitting the reform bill in an attempt to pass whatever elements he can.
The Turnbull government's shown itself time and again to be sensible and pragmatic when it comes to dealing with the Senate, and we won't change our approach in relation to higher education reforms.
This latest package comes after 3 decades of creeping privatisation that slowly turned higher education into high-flying business, where profits trump professors and vice-chancellors are more akin to CEOs. At the heart of the modern-day tertiary business model, full-fee paying international students. More than 300,000 are currently enrolled, up 15% on last year, contributing $24 billion to the Australian economy. But that windfall comes with a hidden cost.
I think they've allowed greed to really compromise their academic standards by being too open to foreign fee-paying students. And, you know, really the risk is that this undermines the whole business model, because if the universities aren't able to sustain their reputation for, you know, fearless and independent academic research, why go there? So this is, I think, a fairly parlous situation that quite a number of our universities find themselves in today.
One national security expert believes the reliance on full fee paying Chinese students is damaging Australia's tertiary institutions.
I think that we are vulnerable to, frankly, being dominated by one country in terms of our approach to international students, which is China. And too much domination is a risk for Australia, because it means to say that we have to start compromising what we might say and do from the point of view of our national security interests. I think this is a real problem.
The Minister doesn't share those concerns.
I'm confident that our universities, though above all else, recognise that it's their reputation, their standing that is on the line, and that's why they take these matters so seriously.
Another serious matter, our federal budget. Net debt is currently $355 billion and rising, and so the push for savings goes on.